Anything else? Section 2 creates a new residential design regulation section in both the former borough and township code. This would permit porches to encroach in the front yard setback a maximum of 8 feet, provided the porch does not exceed 200 square feet. So that's roughly an 8 by 25-foot porch. And it requires that this can only happen when a majority of other structures on the block have porches within the front setback. So what this is really trying to do is, in the existing borough code, there is an exception for porches. However, it's for very small porches. They're 6 by 8 porches. We're expanding that because during the meetings we heard people say, we really like porches. What can you do to encourage them? This is one way to encourage them. We've taken one step, as you remember, last year where we exempted that same 200 square feet, so it doesn't count for FAR. This would allow, again, the streetscape, there's that rhythm, that pattern of porches going into the setback, because that happened a lot, especially with the older homes. This would allow that, because people have been telling us, I'm not going to go to the zoning board for a variance, have a 3-month delay, and allow that. We also heard people say it shouldn't just be that front stoop or a small porch, so we're allowing it to be somewhat larger.
So before you move on, so you're not worried that this is going to, so this is not inconsistent with what we just did on the setbacks. This is not going to allow people to go forward in a way that's jagged on a street.
Correct. The setback there is measured from the building, so this allows a special exception. It doesn't happen a whole lot, but again, we heard over and over again, both at the public meetings and at the focus groups, can't we do something to get people to build porches? They used to always have them, and now they don't seem to. And when we looked at it, we thought maybe by allowing it to be an encroachment into the setback, that would be one way to do that. I did have a comment from one resident about, rather than saying a block, do we want to define that a little bit better? And when we talk about the prevailing setback, we use a distance of 500 feet in either direction. If you're concerned that the block is too nebulous a term, because there are some streets where you would have a very long block, we can refine that. So I just wanted to share with you the comments I've been receiving since this has been out. And then the other is...
Well, can I ask a question about that? You know, Patrick's not here. I'm really having trouble finding my place in the agenda. But what, does anybody know what page we're on?
Yeah, we're on page here. We're 74 on the... 74 on the...
Really?
On the number.
Is block both sides of the street? When you talk about the block, the porches, I mean, are you really counting?
Not normally. We would just do on one side, and I think when we get to the section on prevailing setback, it says on that side of the street. So, I mean, we can use the same language. If you look in section 4, it says on the same side of the street within 500 feet in either direction of the lot. So that would give you the specificity in terms of rather just saying a block, because you could have a block that's 200 feet, you could have one that's 1,000 feet or more. And hearing the comment, it seemed to make sense. And if we just take the same language that we use in the that we're proposing to use in the prevailing setback, I think that clarifies it and probably makes it a little bit stronger.
So instead of block, what would we say?
We would say it would be porches, porches which encroach in the front setback. Wait a minute, I'm sorry, reading the wrong. 200 square feet, and the majority of the structures on the block have roof porches that encroach on the front setback area. We would read that to be that the majority of the structures on the same side of the street within 500 feet in either direction of the lot. So it's very clear. Everybody knows the rule going in.
Well, the only thing I don't know, are there some blocks that change? I mean, and so that might be, you know, like if from one block to the next. So I'm not, you know, if...
you know what I mean? I'm trying to think about this because I can all imagine that we have a sense of where they belong and where they don't, and you know whether this will capture those.
I think it does. 500 feet is a typical block. If you think about.
What about if you're on the end of the block? Is what I'm saying. Because then, what if the houses on the next block are different? Like I'm even thinking about Moore Street where I used to live.
Well, we're going to go 500 feet. So
No,
it
but-
would then, if you're at the end of the block, you're going to go 500 feet either direction. And if you think about it, what that means is the smallest lots are maybe 30 feet wide. Most of the lots in the borough are between 30 and 70. In the western section, they get a little bit larger. In the township, they're probably more likely to be 70 to 100. So going 500 feet is anywhere from 4 to 7, 8 homes on either side of you. That seemed a reasonable sample in terms of both for setback and for the porches, in terms of determining whether or not that's the pattern.
Yeah, I'm just trying to imagine, I can't really think of any places where there's a change abruptly at the end of the block, so
Well,
it's probably good.
And it says you're not allowed, you have to be within the same zoning district. So,
Okay, the second part of Section 2 is about garages, and in there, we're requiring all front entry garages to be set back 6 feet from the facade of the dwelling. That's a new standard. What we were trying to do is, during the public hearings and the focus groups, I think there was probably 80% agreement that can't we do something about the garages that are out on the street, that are facing the street. It's a tough question, simply because almost everybody has a 1 or 2 car garage. It seemed that all the newer homes have a 2-car garage. And what seemed to be most objectionable, while I don't think we can eliminate having those garages, was that they're much more noticeable, less pedestrian friendly when they extend forward. We think by pushing them back, they're going to become a much less dominant feature. You could still have your house sort of extending over and creating a little bit of a covered area, but the intent here is to reduce the impact of that visual impact of the garages either being equal. It almost looks like in some cases the house, half of the house to 3/4 of the house is garages. And one way to react to that is say, let's push them back so they're less dominant. It will require for future home building going forward, they're going to have to come up with a slightly different floor plan because of the way that the garage is going. But in our research, there are other communities that require 6 feet or 8 feet or 4 feet, so that we know that there are solutions out there, and it's not going to be a hardship. It just means they're going to have to start changing some of their plans. So that's the theory behind it. We anticipate probably coming back to this section next year with some more design guidelines, these kind of things. But again, we had a longer list, but not everything had the same consensus as these. So that takes us through Section 2, unless there are, I think, Bernie, you had a question on garages.
yeah, Mr. Miller, I think a lot of people have questions about the garage piece. But anyway, Mr. Miller, you can start.
Can I start off? You did explain what this is intended to accomplish. The section as written talks about front entry garages, and there are some garages where the entry is from the side. Is that covered someplace else?
It is not, because again, if it's from the side, I'm sure with a certain lot configuration they're visible, but there was not much we could really think to improve that. We almost went to looking at requiring side entry garages when the lot was wide enough to allow a car to swing in as one way to avoid seeing the garage. But we didn't have a good standard, or we couldn't come up with anything that would try to lessen that impact on the side entry. And candidly, most of the complaints were about the front entry garages and the fact that they were taking over the streetscape. Not so much, I mean, there's some concern with the garages adding to the bulk, the mass of the structure. But in terms of aesthetics or visual impact, I don't think we heard many comments from a side entry garage other than a concern that you have the side entry garage, you have a lot of pavement on the side to allow for the swing and for some parking. But we didn't have a consensus or identify a need, at least aesthetically, to address side entry garages.
And what about garages where the garage forms an L with the house behind it, and the entrance is a side entrance.
Again, we wouldn't be regulating that. We don't see a lot of them, but there are a few. You're correct, and this would not address that.
But they're not as bad. That's the, they're, because...
Those are more visible
They're
than the
not-
typical side entry, but...
They don't, say to you, garage, you don't see the garage when you're walking down the street, and that, the whole issue is, what does it feel like when you're walking down the street to walk by a house with the garage is all you walk by?
The question of the garage being all you walk by is really a matter of the garage relative to the house, the size of the house, the bulk of the house. A two-car garage with a small house is going to say to you the garage is pretty much all you walk by. A two-car garage with a large house, it's not going to have the same impact, visual impact. I really wonder whether what we want is kind of a Levittown look where everything is set back to the same place.
Wait, what?
Go
Levittown, Pennsylvania.
into an old community like Levittown and visualize what it was when the houses were built. Everything had the same setback.
But you're saying that's what we should do or we shouldn't do?
No, I'm questioning it. I'm questioning whether that is what we're intending to accomplish with all new front entry garages shall be set back 6 feet
Or
from the facade of the
more,
building.
or on the side, or in the back. It's just saying the ones that are if the garages have to be facing the street, which sometimes they do, but they should be set back. But the best thing is for them not to be facing the street at all, really. But this is just talking about garages that are facing the street. And so they wouldn't be, we're saying they're going to be set back.
And in general, whether we use prevailing setback or the underlying setback, they're all within a certain range. So the setback is pretty consistent. Bernie, you're right. It doesn't address the side entry, and it doesn't address the L shape. This was just one way to address that visual impact of the new home being constructed and the garage is out front. It takes away from the pedestrian feel and the neighborhood character. However, if you drive around town, the neighborhood character is garage doors facing the street. So we're trying to lessen that impact a little bit. Many of the older homes either didn't have a garage or only had a one-car garage. The newer homes almost all seem to have a two-car garage.
Ms. Butler and then Ms. Howard.
Well, when you drive around the town is full of split-level houses where the garage is out front. And so are you talking about, and sometimes then the front entrance is set back slightly, but it's different than what the newer homes being built have. So when you say that the garage needs to be set back, if it's a two-story house and the garage is under, one part of it, as they often are, and I guess that's a split
Right.
level, is that...
They'd have to cantilever over. They could still do that so that the
Cantilever over.
face of the house is all set back the same. It's just the garage is pushed back.
If we could get some photographs of some things, and particularly solutions, this feels like it's going to be pretty hard to accomplish if you are building a newer home, if you want to build a contemporary home. I'd like to see some solutions that you've seen. I don't mind if it's flush. I understand this sticking out and not wanting to change the streetscape, but those side entrance garages, they disrupt the streetscape in terms of, if you're walking from a pedestrian point of view, the garage is way out, and it's very far from the porch.
Yeah. Other towns have done it, and so maybe we could cite some other towns that have done it and...
On a
how
small
it
lot,
works.
6 feet's a lot.
It is. What I would suggest we do then is, because of the timing, this has to go to the planning board and then come back to you all before the end of the year. that we can put it off for next year. And if you want, we'll just strike in section 2, number 2, the garage section.
I might propose another way to go. If people are concerned about the setback, maybe we say it can't come forward from the front facade of the house.
Like that, I would hate it if we missed an opportunity to do something, because I feel like that's what I hear from so many people in the community, is aggressive
I thought
garages.
you wanted much more detail, but you could just simply change it to that all new front entry garages shall be flush or set back from the facade of the main dwelling unit.
So then Bernie can reintroduce Levittown.
I don't, yeah,
I don't know if that helps to address your concern or not.
well, it sort of does, but but if 6 feet back is the better solution, I'd rather have the better solution, but I just can't picture it without.
Well, we're going to get to public comment in a minute.
Well, one reason I think this might be a good idea is that we were all, part of the, one of the things that the consultant has said is that one solution is to have, he kept calling it hand on the shoulder, which I don't understand, like you put your hand on the shoulder and tell people, but it's called hand on the shoulder guidelines. And so that's where you talk about things that are desirable. I mean, you have that in a document that the planning office can give developers, and so we could put the setback, the 6 feet setback. I mean, we're going to be working on that, something like that. I'm not sure if we are going to do it, but we're considering it. So it seems like in order to get it done, we could put the straight across one in, and that way we could have something. Because I think Patrick shared your concern too.
I don't have a super strong feeling about this, except this just feels a little bit to me like where we were last year, when it seems like a no-brainer, and we do it at the end of the year, and then it churns up a lot of unintended consequences, and people are upset. So I don't know. Otherwise, I feel,
Yeah. I mean, we have had, we've had a lot of meetings on it, so I understand.
From the comments we heard, I think they were two types of comments. One was everybody hated when the garage is forward.
Yeah.
And you all know some
Agreed.
of those examples.
Yeah.
They were called snout houses or garage first. And they said, can't we do something to make certain that never happens again? The answer is yes. We could go with whether it's flush or setback or 6 feet. The second part of the comment, or the other type of comments that we heard were, can't we do something to reduce the dominance of garages in the design of some of these new homes? And we took that to mean push that garage back. I think people would rather see it as a detached garage in the rear. That's not going to happen. We tried incentivizing that by saying you don't have to count it against your FAR. If you put it in the back, nobody was doing it. So the 6 feet really came from, after a research of the literature, saying, what do other towns do? They require them to be set back. I understand your concern in saying, can you show me what that looks like and how it, I don't have one today, and it's going to take me a little while to find something. I think a reasonable alternative is to say at least flush or set back. That's really the pattern of probably 80% of the homes. They are flush. They're still dominant feature because they're so big. You're getting 24 feet of garage door facing the street and maybe 20 or 24 feet or something like that of the house.
well, that is a little bit of my question, I guess I was trying to get at. When you drive around town, you see a lot of the split levels, so when you say it can't stick out more than any part of the house, I mean, as Bernie said, we don't want all the houses to have to be perfectly flush.
Right, that's where
across.
you would have flush or set back, so that you would not allow the garage to come forward. Because some of them come forward 8 feet, some come forward 2 feet, some are flush or slightly recessed. So there are a variety, but in terms of reducing the visual impacts and the appearance of the dominance of the garage and car parking, keeping it flush or pushing it back seemed the best alternatives.
So, yeah, I mean, I think that's the right solution now, since this is part of our Move Quickly package, and as part of our longer range, we can explore others. I mean, like Joe, I'd like to see it, but I don't want to hold it up, and I think that would be progress. So I would recommend we just amend now so that we can get it done before the end of the year.
We would go with flush or setback.
yeah.
We can come back at another time. We're going to come back hopefully with a series of amendments next year, and we can revisit this issue.
Great.
Yeah, and I will, just as a last word on that, the consultant did have pictures of what it looked like when, just to take a step back and talk about, because Jenny and I have been at a million of these meetings, but one of the concepts that stuck with me in a way to sort of think about what we're trying to do here is that I think this is part of a new sort of theory of planning, that homes should have, in addition to obviously being private property and homes for families and individuals, that they should have a gift to the street. And that's what makes it a walkable community, and that's what creates the streetscape. So some of what we're trying to do here is to put into our ordinances things that will help homes have that gift to the street. And the garages, we've heard over and over again, are the salient thing that are making it so that the front door, instead of having the front entrance be the thing that catches your eye and that welcomes you in, it's the garage. And that just sends a very different message about the kind of community we're in.
So are you recommending that we stick, I mean, I'm willing to...
No, I mean, I think it's, I mean, there are pictures. A lot of the stuff has come from, we're looking at other communities, we're looking at best practices. I mean, I think if we look at the pictures, and, we did get an email, and if you look around town, there are a lot that are flush. So, I think there's other things that we might want to come back at with that, and to help de-emphasize the garage, even if it is flush. I did have one question, though, about what new meant. So, my computer just went to sleep, so I got to call it back up. But it says all new front entry garages. And is that, so if you have a garage that is existing, that's falling apart, and you need to replace, is that considered a new garage?
Not typically. If you tear it down completely, it would be a new one, but if you're just doing maintenance, it's not. Typically, all of these regulations that we're talking about will apply to new construction. Everything else is grandfathered. When we get into, the prevailing setback, if you're much further back or much further, or very close, it's allowed. They're not retroactively applied. What happens is when you build something new, you put it on an addition, you scrape the home and build a new one, these new standards apply. It doesn't affect anything that's existing.
Okay.